So technically, the starting of the Civil War wasn't an insurrection on the issue of slavery, correct?
The term insurrection has been used to describe a mass of people attempting through force to prevent the implementation of laws, whether in their view or in our view, that was a righteous cause or a not so righteous cause. But in the aftermath of the Civil War, the concern was about an insurrection against the Constitution. Not only was there a civil war, but there was also the secession from the Union, which was an affirmative repudiation and assault on our constitutional democracy. Again, as you said, over the issue of slavery.
Let's talk about creating a life and country we're proud of. Together, I'm your host, Alvina Vasquez. Welcome to Alvina Talks Shift. Today's a very special episode for me because this is something that's happening in the world right now. And it's super important to talk about these things because it has impacts for the future and future, litigation, future law, future presidential candidates. And it could shake up the way our politics shifts in the future. So I'm so excited to have Martha Tierney and Donald Sherman with me. Martha is a Colorado community leader. She's been working in a lot of election law and really making sure people have the rights to have their voice heard for a very long time. So I'll let her talk about that. And then Donald and I met recently this year when he was telling me about what he's working on here in Colorado and he needed to make some connections. So first, I want to talk to Martha. Martha, when you started to do this type of law, I know when you go to law school, there's no like specifics. You kind of decide where you want to go. Where did your passion come from with election law? What is election law? And what are the kinds of cases that you usually work on in the future, like now? And then what do you expect to happen in the future?
Sure. Thanks, Alvina. So I have always been passionate about politics and democracy and preserving our democracy and trying to make sure we have an equitable and fair democracy for everyone. And so when I first started practicing, I was not practicing election law in any way, but I started to develop that practice early on in my career because it was something I was so passionate about. So, um, my first big case was in no, it was probably 2003. It was a case challenging we challenged the voter ID law in Colorado, which was the first time we had a voter ID law. And I just got the bug, and from thereafter, just have always worked in election law and in trying to protect our democracy.
And Donald, you and I just met. I don't know that much about how you came to do the work that you do. So I'd love to learn and, share with our audience your experience that brought you to do this work.
Sure, a series of happy accidents. But started out my career as a lawyer in private practice and quickly decided that I wanted to do something more on the policy side and to uh, both strengthen our democracy and expand access to it. That led me to Congress, where I worked in various capacities, including in the House on the Ethics Committee and the Oversight Committee, in the Senate on the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee. And, through working in government, I came across opportunities to work with non-governmental organizations like Crew to advance policy. And during the Trump years, decided that working on the NGO side might be the most effective way for me to influence policy and to address the ethical abuses that we were seeing from that administration. And so, after a number of years in government, I'm on my second stint at Crew.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, we are pursuing what I think is one of the more important legal cases and legal issues related to defending our democracy that certainly there have been in it has been in quite some time.
Let's talk about when Trump was first elected. What were you feeling? Like, personally, within your community, within your families, what did you all experience? Especially knowing, what was at risk, because you all know more than most of us about what is at risk with our democracy. I'll start with you, Donald.
Sure, I think like a lot of folks, um, I was concerned that someone who had demonstrated such disdain for ethical rules and disdain for government service, which is something that I revere, was now in the highest office in the land. I think, uh, like a lot of people, I was not cautiously optimistic, but I was, hopeful that the worst fears that people had expressed wouldn't come to fruition. Whatever hope there was of that was quickly dashed based on some of the early decisions that the former president made, including ignoring ethics guidance from the head of the Office of Government Ethics to divest from his business. And then the question became for me, uh, was whether the institutions in place were strong enough to oppose the abuses that we were going to see and that we would see. And I think that's what ultimately sort of led me to leave a job in the United States Senate to come to Crew in the first instance, is because I just didn't have a great deal of confidence that that particular body at that particular time was prepared to meet the moment. And it seemed clear that there were organizations on the outside, including Crew, which I had been familiar with since its founding, um, were doing their level best to meet the moment. And so I thought that whatever skills and talents that I had to bring to bear, would be most useful there.
So you felt like a call to service at that point.
Indeed.
And what about you, Martha? What was your feeling on election night?
I represent the Colorado Democratic Party and have run their voter protection effort for many, 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 many years. And so I had been, in fact, in court on election day 2016, trying to keep the polls open late because there had been some issues with access to certain voter service and polling centers. So when and we were in court late meaning till after the results started coming out, maybe 8 p.m. And when I got back to my office and saw what was happening, I was, like many, in disbelief. And um, the next morning, I remember my kids. I have twin boys who at that time were 10, and they said to me, "Mommy, is Donald Trump going to come after you?"
Oh.
Because they were really worried about my safety,
Yeah.
which was a wake up call, really, and it made me really um, redouble my efforts to try to make sure that we have a working democracy, and that, as Donald said, that our institutions were, you know, going to be able to withstand this kind of um, assault. So I just kept working. I chair the National Governing Board of Common Cause, and in that role, we worked hard and continue to work hard to ensure that our government is held accountable, and meeting the needs of citizens of this country. So yeah, it was a scary moment. I think we're in another scary moment, and it's going to take all of us working together to make sure that this democracy stands.
So where does democracy stand right now? How are you all feeling about it? I mean, especially, and we'll talk about the work that you're doing now, but especially what you've experienced in the past, I would say, 3 or 4 years since the last election.
I think we're in a dangerous place. I think that our there is a large body of people in this country who um, I don't think democracy is something to work to save or work to create, to preserve. And I think that puts us at a very dangerous threshold, because this experiment, the United States of America, it's not guaranteed to last unless we make sure that our democratic systems hold, and we make sure that it's equitable for everyone and not only those who um, kiss the ring of someone who doesn't believe in those democratic systems. So I'm worried about it. I think that we all should be worried about it, and we need to collectively ensure that this democracy stands and works for everyone.
Yeah, one of the encouraging things that I've seen over both encouraging and, to be honest, frightening things I've seen over the last several years is how many people have been forced into the position of having to stand in the breach to defend the Constitution against the former president, who is determined to eviscerate it. And that includes former Vice President Pence. And I think his latest comments are evidence of that includes former Congresswoman Liz Cheney. It includes, regular people like Shane Lawson and Ruby Freeman. It includes regular folks like the plaintiffs that we represent in Colorado who, bravely stepped forward to bring this case to ensure that their rights and the Constitution are vindicated against an individual who a court has now found engaged in an insurrection against the Constitution of the United States. Democracy is work, and I've been, again, both chastened and but also inspired by the willingness of people who have as much power as a sitting vice president, but who have as little power as sort of ordinary school teacher, like one
Mhm.
of our clients is, to say no. The Constitution has to abide, and if we are going to have a democracy going forward, we need more people, both in positions of power and outside of the levers of power, to be willing to stand up for the Constitution, even in the face of the former president of the United States.
Thank you so much. I think that in the media, like I said, these terms have become very charged and very, thrown at people like, almost like derogatory comments towards people, right? So, Donald, I wanna switch gears a little bit and talk about the work that you've been doing and what you've been learning and investigating to get to the point of where we are today.
You mean with respect to Section 3?
Yeah, mhm,
So, in the aftermath of the Civil War, the Reconstruction Congress was very concerned about how to ensure that there weren't future insurrections or rebellions, and making sure that insurrectionists who had just led that rebellion against the United States Constitution, um, did not have the keys to government office again.
I don't think anybody's ever described the Civil War as an insurrection. Like, I don't think anybody's ever said that to me in all of my history classes. So technically, the starting of the Civil War wasn't an insurrection on the issue of slavery, correct?
Yeah, I think that's a fair way of describing it. Um, and um, there were earlier insurrections. Whether that was the what's now referred to as the whiskey insurrection, which was a bunch of folks who took up arms to prevent um, laws being implemented, govern that taxing spirits, and other insurrections through time. There were abolitionist insurrections, where folks took up arms to oppose the enforcement of the Fugitive Slave Act. The term insurrection has been used to describe a mass of people attempting through force to prevent the implementation of laws, whether in their view or in our view, that was a righteous cause or a not so righteous cause. But in the aftermath of the Civil War, the concern was about an insurrection against the Constitution. Not only was there a civil war, but there was also the secession from the Union, which was an affirmative repudiation and assault on our constitutional democracy. Again, as you said, over the issue of slavery. And so the Reconstruction Congress wanted to create a mechanism to ensure that insurrectionists and rebels did not get the tools of government and could not run the government anymore. And so Section 3 was created um, to ensure that officers um, who uh, engaged in insurrection or rebellion and took an oath to support the Constitution, and then engaged in insurrection or rebellion against that Constitution of the United States, could not serve as officers in state or federal government going forward, unless they were granted amnesty by 2/3 of Congress, which is what the provision says. Now, in the immediate aftermath of January 6th, um, I think the attack on the Capitol was commonly referred to as an insurrection, including by Donald Trump's lawyers during his impeachment trial in the Senate. There were bipartisan votes in the House and the Senate, and politicians of all political stripes who referred to January 6th as an insurrection, and there were bipartisan votes in the House and the Senate, citing Donald Trump as inciting that insurrection. So this wasn't an especially controversial Um, concept, 2.5 years ago, or nearly 3 years ago now, in the immediate aftermath of January 6th. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment says that, if you are an insurrectionist who violated your oath, you cannot serve or hold office as a state or government official going forward. And so, I think people read that and sort of had questions intuitively about what it meant. But my colleagues and I at Crew thought about, well, what would it mean? What would it take to enforce that provision against the insurrectionists who were seeking to hold or to acquire positions in government? And so that led us to litigation in New Mexico last year on behalf of three brave New Mexico residents who filed suit and won the first successful case in more than 150 years to enforce the disqualification clause of the Constitution against any office holder. That case, it was Otero County Commissioner Coy Griffin. And then, as you know, this year, along with Martha and co-counsel in Colorado. Um, our clients, six Republican and unaffiliated voters in Colorado, brought suit in the district court in Colorado to bar former President Trump from the ballot based on his engagement in insurrection on January 6th.
That's going to be part 1. Thank you all for joining us. Donald and I, and we hope Martha will be able to rejoin us to continue the conversation in the next episode about what happened in Colorado. The outcomes were recently announced, but I know that there's other steps down the road. So stay with us. We'll talk to you in the next episode. Thank you for watching Alvina Talks Shift. Please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, engage, empower, evolve. If you liked this episode, or if you want more content like this, go to alvinatalkshift.com or wherever you listen to podcasts.